Good afternoon, and thanks for sticking around for the afternoon session. My name is Stephen Wilson, Managing Partner with Wilson Paramount Company, and delighted to have a chance today to talk to you about growth in the age of complexity. You know, we, as a strategy and operations firm, we have a unique perspective and IP and point of view around the issue of complexity, around competing in a complex environment, simplifying to grow, and so on. So, delighted to have this chance. And again, on the issue of growth in the age of complexity, we really see that being two parts. One, understanding the complexity in your business today, because complexity can be a huge drag on growth. It can be certainly a restraint on agility, to go to the theme of this track. But at the same time, you've got to think about how you position for growth. Are you creating more complexity or creating more scale as you grow? So understand those trade-offs. As the slide indicates, we have a couple of books out. If people want more content or further reading, Waging More Complexity Costs came out in 2009. Really at the sort of the depth of the financial crisis, when we saw a lot of companies struggling with the complexity that crept into the portfolios, processes, and organizational structures, and how to unwind that to liberate a lot of costs, given the fact that a lot of revenues had sort of plummeted at that point. And then we're very excited that the Growth in the Age of Complexity, our next book, is coming out later this summer. On the topic of that book, I wanted to kind of provide a little bit of the seed of where some of the ideas came from. So after the first book came out in 2009-10, we were meeting with a lot of different companies around the US, talking about the issue of complexity in the book. And we had one meeting actually in Denver, hence the snowy picture. And it was a technology firm, and the situation was this: they'd actually formed through a number of investors, had grown rapidly over the last 7-8 years, mostly through acquisitions, and they were now about $10 billion in sales. And the issue was, at this point in the plan, they were supposed to be generating about $1 billion of profit, and we're actually about break even. So we were talking about the issue of complexity, and they were kind of resonating on that topic. And we talked about the sources of complexity, the impacts, and we talked about also a very central theme from the first book, which is the idea of this complexity cost curve. The curve there in red that says, as complexity increases, your complexity costs increase geometrically. And we talked about this, and it really struck a nerve. And they said, God, I wish I had this graph 10 years ago. This is what killed our scale. So we sort of left this meeting thinking, here's an organization, a large organization, that had grown fast with smart people, and they hadn't factored in the impact of complexity on their growth plan. So surely, this should be central, at least a lens through which you look as you go on your growth strategy or growth endeavors, to make sure you don't look back 10 years from now and say, what happened to our scale? And the reason why this is important, because we are being barraged by complexity. I mean, you probably have your own stories of complexity, but if you go back 15, 20 years, it was a much simpler world. If you take the example of a traditional grocery store, that maybe over 30, 40 years became operationally better and better at getting cans of soup from the supplier to the shelf edge. And then starting 15, 20 years ago, suddenly expanded the range, went from groceries to clothing and electronics to new channels. I mean, I think Walmart.com launched, I think, in 2000. So again, the omni-channel world is a relatively recent phenomenon, and people still struggle on the operational side of that. New geographies, new matrix organizations, everyone's favorite. More complex processes as a result. More systems and technology, which are there ostensibly to make our world easier, but sometimes don't. And more regulation. So the point here is not just an additive factor, it's not just new products going through new channels into new geographies. It's a multiplicative factor. It's new products going through these new channels into new geographies. And if you think about the supply chain that grew up incrementally getting better and better, getting those cans of soup from the supply to the shelf edge, suddenly being hit by this wave of complexity, you can see why many organizations are really struggling with complexity coming onto their processes. And the impact, of course, is this. This is the complexity cost curve, which again shows how complexity costs, which you can think of as being the coordination costs, the hidden costs, manufacturing, so the setup, the extra inventory, in service world, it's all those meetings and lots of productivity. how complexity costs increase geometrically with the advent of complexity. This curve has always existed, but 15, 20 years ago, we were at the flat end of that curve. And the double whammy here is at the same time, we're also seeing this kind of revenue line of diminishing returns. We are putting more products and services out there, we're launching new services, which in many times is cannibalizing our existing revenue. So low incremental revenue, accelerating complexity costs. And so while there are some companies that are still here where you have more room to grow, you have relatively low levels of complexity, more room to put more variety onto the marketplace, many more companies are up here where you have the complexity costs are actually greater than the incremental revenue you're generating in the business. And the net of this is the whale curve. Who's seen this curve before? Okay. So we didn't invent this curve, but we explain what's behind it. And really, it's a demonstration of profit concentration. The idea that 20 to 30% of products generate more than 300% of profits in an organization. It's actually from a study of studies, but a few points to make on this chart. One, when we do this with our own clients, and actually we see this relationship to be more acute in the last 5 years than this even indicates. Often it's 7 to 8% of products that generate all the value in the organization. Second point I want to make here is actually most large organizations have a whale curve. I think it's worth thinking about how this would be received in your own organization. But it's a natural phenomenon as you grow, particularly when you grow and start to proliferate products and services, you will get to this whale curve. The third point here is it's not just around cost. If you think about all the resources tied up in that 70 to 80% of products or services that don't generate incremental value for the organization, if you could liberate those resources, both financial and people, to high growth areas, it could be a phenomenal turbo boost for the organization. But finally, just on this chart, this is clearly an indication of value and opportunity. The difficulty is hard to get to this because it requires often unwinding across product dimensions, across process dimensions, and organizational dimensions to really get to the benefit. Let me explain, give you an example of what I mean by that. So, this is an organization that actually had proliferated its product portfolio to a degree it created a very expensive distribution network that was really eroding its profitability. It had the highest price point, the best market share, best brand, but still made less money than all its competitors. They had 70,000 SKUs across 70 plants in the US. And we did some work with them, and the first clue was the fact that their interplant transfer cost was actually higher than the manufacturing cost. And this sort of stirred some concern because they were thinking this being a smaller cost item. So we started to pull the thread on that. And what we found was actually that what happened over time, each plant had almost become an innovation engine. So and to be responsive to customers, they had developed new products. As those products took off on a local basis, other plants across the US heard about them, so they started shipping these across the country. So often you had these 2 or 3 stops along the way. So we said, hey, if you actually think about the portfolio, there's a lot of substitution possible inside the portfolio. You consolidate the offering to make a larger proportion you can make on a local basis. You can eliminate this huge distribution cost and get to this significant financial prize. And the interesting thing here is they'd actually tried to go through portfolio optimization several times. It never got any traction. It was only when they saw the benefit actually laid in the operating model that actually it got traction to drive this forward. So again, with complexity, you have to think about this like a systemic issue. It often requires 2 or 3 moves to liberate the benefit. So we have complexity that has an impact on both profitability and growth. So we would say you need actually different mindsets and different skill sets to really navigate this age of complexity. This is from the new book, Growth in the Age of Complexity. And we don't have time to go into this in depth, but again, it's all in the book. But very briefly, we think you need what we call this explorer's mindset, the ability to really develop a bolder strategy, more differentiated, speed in decisions in a different way, learn to experiment in a very, in a much more fundamental way. and easily transition resources. So we're constantly shape-shifting in response to new market opportunities. We also need new navigated skill set. Know where we make money, better operating models, and so on. So let me just pull out a couple of these things just to sort of give you an idea. On the experiment frequently, there's a lot of good discussion about this right now. But I think there's a great quote from Scott Cook from Intuit that said, "Hey, in the old days, a manager's job was to make decisions. Today, the manager's job is to frame experiments." We actually there's a lot of truth to that, which is that it's getting harder and harder to predict winners from the ivory tower in the way that we used to in the old days. So therefore, we need to understand how to experiment quickly to understand what configuration of actions can actually create winning products and services in this day and age. On the navigated skill set, I'll hit the first one here, know where we make money. Most organizations that are still using standard costs don't really know where you make money. There's too much cross-subsidization. Unless you've been through a very substantial activity-based costing type activity, you probably have you're subsidizing certain products, and the complexity costs aren't really captured in your current profitability reporting. So we have a way we do that called square root crossing, which is much faster. Again, you need to find some way to understand where are you creating value in the organization. The reason why we need these mindsets and skill sets is because in many ways we're still operating like it's the industrial age, where there wasn't this issue of complexity. And if we don't have these mindsets and skill sets, we're going to fall prey to what we call the sirens of growth. So you all remember the sirens of the Greek mythology, the Odyssey? You're nodding. It's like, well. So they would lure the sailors onto the rocks with a siren song, which appeared very attractive, actually led to disaster. We think there are, very similarly in a business sense, there are certain growth strategies that appear very attractive, but then as companies follow them through, because they are really better suited to the industrial age, lead to issues where you crash onto the rocks. So let me introduce the signs of growth. So the first one is, of course, the expanding portfolio, which may be intuitive. More is better. Give the customer what they want. It can lead to issues, which we'll get into a second. The greener pasture. We did very well here at home. Why don't we replicate that and go do this overseas, or expand into a new category, which can lead to, again, potential disaster. The smash hit, which says, if we get this one thing right, all our problems are over. This one product, this new technology platform. But again, in this day and age, it's really around continually building new differentiation versus any one particular act of differentiation. And finally, castle walls, which is a different sort of siren, which says, hey, those declining margins are just a short-term blip. We start to funnel resources in really defending an advantage that really is no longer viable in today's world. So let me hit on a couple of these in more depth. The first, the expanding portfolio. Again, it's very attractive, has very attractive siren songs, it's more is better than less. Whatever the customers ask for, let's see what sticks. And it's attractive because to a degree it works, right? You get to start to segment your demand, customers respond to that, but it works up to a point, beyond which you start to get confused customers, you have increases in costs of working capital, overwhelmed sales force, deteriorating service levels, supply chains under fire, and really the fog of too many SKUs. So again, it's understand that smart variety before it starts to erode your opportunity. So whenever I hear, hey, our strategy is sort of an all things to all people, that's often a warning sign, right? Particularly in this day and age. Another siren here, the greener pasture, which the siren song says, hey, we went at home, we will do great over here. Other markets must be easier than this one. So I mean, as every UK retailer knows who's tried to conquer America, this isn't always right. Work out. And what it's really, the heart of this is really underestimating the additional complexity that comes from pursuing adjacency. It's not saying don't pursue adjacency. All these sirens are saying if we just follow this one strategy without understanding granular nuance, we're going to get into trouble. So with greener pasture, you can certainly pursue an adjacency, but it may lead to an expensive misadventure. As you go into new acquisitions, the erosion of scale, it may even jeopardize a core business. Let me give you an example. I think everyone's familiar with Chiquita, with bananas, right? They also have a very big salad business. And you can see how, as a business that's prone to commodity swings, it would be very attractive to think about how do we protect ourselves against those commodity swings, right? So back in 2004, there was a discussion about what to do as a strategy, and said, hey, why don't we become a CPG company? So they started to launch, packaged foods, even went into retail business to some degree with these stands, and as a result, saw some unexpected outcomes. The R&D costs went up, marketing costs went up, the non-core investment went down, so the core business was really neglected, sales declined, costs increased, and it got to a pretty critical point for the business. Around 2012, that all changed around, and then went back to really focusing on the core business, and things recovered and so on. But again, you can kind of see how you can get lured into this trap. Hey, we're in a commodity business, let's move to a CPG to buffer against that, but without really understanding the impacts on your core business from the adjacent business, you can have issues. Which again, we've seen people do this very, very well, but we've seen issues like this occur as well. So very quickly, just the last slide just to wrap up, we'll leave with a few questions to take it back into your own business. And again, to go back to the initial framing, thinking about the complexity in your business today, do you have too much complexity? How do you see it? Is it around process, product, organization? What's the impact? Is there impact on your working capital, on your responsiveness to customers, your profitability? Again, and how is it impacting your ability to serve customers? Because that's a leading indicator, obviously, for growth. Secondly, on future complexity and the sirens, which sirens do you see in your business or your strategy? Are any starting to ring any bells with you? What are the implications potentially if you continue pursuing this siren without really understanding the granularity of the requirements for new adjacencies and new expansion? And then which are the capabilities, which are the biggest gaps as you think about from the explorer's mindset and the navigator's skill set? So I think with that amount of time, right?
We have a couple minutes.
Okay, so that's really wrap it up right there. Again, there's more content in the books, and we have the new book coming out in the summer. But if there's any questions, I'd love to take them now.
I don't know if you've looked at this, but on your bell curve, do you see any relationship between where products are at in their life cycle and where they fall on that curve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you think about what to do with that well curve, it's not simply a matter of just taking out things that are low margin or low volume, because you need to understand the life cycle perspective. I mean, when we think about portfolio, we think about three things matter. Incremental revenue, the ability to generate new revenues, incremental cost, because you understand the complexity cost, and life cycle perspective. So that's obviously a critical part of that issue. Having said that, we often see things defended because they either, well, it's an early life cycle product or it's linked revenue, and a lot of those things are sort of red herrings as well. Other questions? Okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
Is your growth book out yet?
It is coming out in the summer. Do we have any of the excerpts with us?
Oh,
Okay, if you want to stop by the booth, we have some excerpts of the first two chapters. So yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So does that help you deal with the sirens? Is that what the book is about?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to call it the Sirens of Growth, but we're going to change the title. So, take it over then. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.